it has to be the grown-up.
Somebody's got to do it.
I know.
Good evening, Stacy. Hey, Beth.
Yes,
When you're done with your presentation, will you stop the screen share so I can see everybody?
absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
3 minutes.
You already talked about the earthquake, I guess, huh?
Yeah, a little bit, but we can talk about it again. Were you?
No, I was just at my desk and I felt this and then I thought, oh, what's wrong with me? Like you said, I heard you say, should you call the doctor? And then I looked up and my blinds were swaying. I'm like, oh, I know what that is. So
I was hiking. I was almost to Waterwheel Falls, I guess, when the earthquake hit. So I didn't feel it. I was feeling the thundering roar of the mighty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, got back in. Yeah, so glad everybody's okay. It sounds like maybe there was some rockfall at Whitney Portal or.
Yeah, it looked pretty
okay.
Pretty daunting. The last I looked, there were no injuries reported yet, but yeah, some of the pictures of the dust from the slides is impressive.
I mean, that's where the 7.6 was back in the day.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big
In 1980?
No, in 18.
No, in the 19th century, like 1881 or something. Yeah. The marker that on the.
Yeah.
1995, yeah. You have ever driven up there? I drove up there one time. It was interesting, you know.
I tried, I got completely lost.
We're lucky we've got you, Robin. We're lucky.
I know, right?
And then we don't know what happened. She just wandered off and she never came back.
She thought she was having a stroke, but no. Luckily she wasn't.
Luckily she wasn't. That's a good thing.
Ay, ay, ay. All right, we got about a minute. Okay, it's 5:30. I'm going to get us started. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready? All right. So I'm not sure if I should say good evening or good afternoon, but so I'll say both. Good evening and good afternoon. Welcome to Coping in a COVID World, put on here by Mono County for our wonderful community out there. My name is Robin Roberts. I work for Mono County Behavioral Health. I'm going to introduce to you who is on our panel, and then we'll start off with some wonderful information by Beth Cohen, who will be here to talk us through how to identify some of the feelings you might be having while we're trying to manage everything that's going on with COVID, and then also helping us through a mindfulness practice, which will be relaxing. And then lastly, we'll be doing a poll again, like we did last time we were here. So that's always exciting. Okay, so I'm going to introduce, we have Linda Salcedo. She's the Mayor Pro Tem for the town of Mammoth Lakes. Stacy Corliss is the chair of the Mono County Board of Supervisors. We have the sheriff here, Sheriff Braun. Alicia Venos is the department lead for the tourism and economic development. And then joining us tonight from Mono County Behavioral Health, we have Cassandra Montez and Stephanie Valadez. And then again, my name's Robin. So I'm going to introduce Beth Cohen to you. She is a clinical expert with trauma in the workplace and also an expert in mass trauma, which we are in. She does many other things. She works with Mono County. We're very pleased to have her here. Take it away, Beth.
Thanks, Robin. Good evening, everyone. I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to talk about some coping and how everyone how is everyone coping through this. I know when everything first started, I believed that we were not going to be in the present state as we are with COVID as long as we've been. So I'm also understanding and seeing for myself and all of those that I speak to every week, that people are really starting to notice that they're being affected in ways that perhaps they weren't in the beginning weeks. So I want us to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the things that I'm hearing. I do these presentations nationally, probably about 4 or 5 a week. And so I have the opportunity of sort of hearing what's going on and how people are experiencing, what the experiences have been. Certainly there's been an increase not only in emotional responses, but also in some behavioral responses. Over the weeks, we're starting to see still anxiety is very high, which probably won't surprise anybody. But I'm also hearing about sort of an increase in anger, an increase in frustration. Some people are reporting that they're really feeling down and isolated and alone. And I want us, as we're talking about coping this evening, to be able to address some of that, because if you're noticing in any way that you are having some emotional sort of or emotional states that you're not used to, or that are uncomfortable, or that are even concerning to you, or if you're seeing family members or loved ones or colleagues, please know that this is a very, very hard time. Last time we talked a little bit about sort of why this virus has become so complex, and you guys can see it's not just about illness and survival, right? It's about the fact that we can't be with the people in our village that we love as we're used to, because every other person in our lives, including the ones we love, or potentially could harm us, and they could potentially harm us, but obviously not wanting to harm us, or we don't want to harm them. There's a lot of issues going on now as we're reopening our communities, and this interfacing anxiety that people are feeling, as well as, unfortunately, our communities have been impacted from layoffs and financial issues, and our lifestyles have been really weird. Our lifestyles are not what we remember, and I know we're all trying to adjust to them. And of course, we have a future that's not exactly as certain as we're used to. We are seeing something else too, and I don't know if our panel is experiencing this too, but there is a significant, in the last 12 weeks, a significant addition or level of exhaustion and sleep problems that people are now reporting, which for me is a concern, because of course, with a problem with sleep and with exhaustion, then we end up with a problem with decreased amount of focus and productivity. So the combination, if you're noticing that you're not focusing as well, or sort of, managing as well, even if you're noticing you have sort of a short fuse, and you're quicker to react, all of that is really common. And when we're not sleeping well, or if we are sleeping well, we still are waking up exhausted. This is the most amazing experience. And I don't know if you guys, please feel free to put any chats in on what you're experiencing. It would be really helpful for us to know what you're experiencing, your responses are. But what's so interesting to me is that I can actually have a whole good night's sleep and still be exhausted. So what's fascinating to me is that there is something in this process, and I'm not sure what it is, perhaps the repetition of every day, or just the levels of stress that we're feeling. Maybe we're not talking about it, but the level of stress that we're feeling are because of all of these sort of unknowns and unpredictability right now. But many are, it's kind of validating for me, because many people are talking about absolutely feeling exhausted a lot of the time. Now, I don't also know about you guys, but also I noticed an impact on my own productivity, and I have from the beginning. And I was hoping as the weeks went on, it would get better. And actually, I'm noticing that it's decreasing, unfortunately. So if anyone's noticing that you're not focusing like you're used to, please know that's also very common right now. And people all over the country are reporting that. And of course, as we're interfacing more, and I know today our news wasn't as good in California as certainly I was hoping, there is a significant amount of interfacing anxiety. And I want to say something about that level of anxiety. It is really normal to have interfacing anxiety, given that we were initially told not to go out because it was, quote unquote, sort of a danger to go out. So now, as we're kind of welcome to go and start to re-enter our worlds, please know that our brains are not going to forget the fact that we were told that it was potentially a danger to go out. So if you notice that you're sort of having this push-pull experience, that is part of it, is that we you know, what is now or was seen as dangerous is now okay for us to go as long as we practice certain practices. I say that too because what I'm noticing is that we all are assessing what it is that we need in terms of our levels of risk, how much risk tolerance we have, whether it's because of health issues or family members who may have health issues or our age, whatever that is. So we all really are in very different places to be able to make our own individual assessments of what we need and what our you know, what I call our germ family might need, whoever it is that you're with. So I want us to talk today, though, about some coping skills and sort of coping, and I'd love to know what you guys are doing to help you manage the stress of this. There's a lot of options and things in which hopefully the next time we're together, I'll be able to talk about more of them. But right now, I want to talk about three and specifically. I want us to talk about the fact that, the interesting fact that well-being is actually a skill that you can learn at any age. If you get real clarification and real clarity of intention, and you make a commitment, and you're willing to sort of try and try and try, anyone can actually create this more well-being. But one of the issues that we have is less about being able to create this, do the skill of well-being. It's more about whether or not you feel worthy or you're willing or you feel badly if you want to actually take good care of yourself. And many of us do not feel, we're not very good at self-care. It's much easier for us to sort of take care of others than it is ourselves. And I'm going to say this because I am that kind of person as well, but I need to tell you guys, this is a time where if we do not focus on our self-care, we will notice that we are not going to be functioning as well as the weeks and the months are going on. So if there's ever been a time in your life where you thought, you know what, I'm going to have to really try this, even if I don't feel worthy or I feel guilty or not everybody else is taken care of, this is the time to really do it. And I'm going to start out actually, and just for today, to talk about mindfulness practices as one of those areas and coping skills. At the end of this, I have some really interesting options for you guys to download apps around mindfulness. And for those of you, then I'll add just a few other areas that we'll talk about, and then I'm going to go more deeply into what mindfulness is. But while I'm speaking, I'd really like to invite each of you. The secret to meditation practices, I've been teaching thousands of how to meditate, is actually just breathing, but it's conscious breathing. So I invite all of you just to let all the air out of your lungs if you don't mind, and then start to notice breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. But make sure that on your exhale, when you're exhaling, sort of your out breath, that you get all the air out before you start again on your inhale. So just practice that. And listen to me, you might even notice immediately sort of your body may sort of just relax a little, or just find yourself in a bit of a different state as you're just focusing on your breathing while I'm talking. By the way, anybody can focus on their breathing all day long if you'd like. The only time you can't is when you are speaking. So there are other areas that we're going to talk about in other weeks, and that is adaptive versus maladaptive coping. What's the importance of social connections? A lot of people are talking about feeling isolated. We're going to talk about sort of some realistic expectations another time, distraction strategies and reducing information. Every one of us wants information to reduce our anxiety, and yet many people are on information overload. Also, there's some strategies that we're going to talk about as well, and I'm going to mention that today in mindfulness practices in terms of your own self-talk, your own beliefs, what it is you say to yourself. And then, of course, you guys are living in Mono, and I'm not. The most beautiful place that I've ever seen is Mono County. And so I hope that all of you are giving yourself permission to go out into nature, do it safely, please, and just sort of allow yourself to physically move and do whatever you might be needing. And of course, for those who decide that they might need some extra support, I have some resources for you at the end. But I want to talk now just about mindfulness practices.
Come sit with me.
So if you allow yourself to continue to breathe right now, I'd like you to let all the air out of your lungs again, please. And if you want, you can even close your eyes. And allow yourself to take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it at the top of the breath this time, just a little differently. And then exhale through your nose, letting all the oxygen, all the air out of your lungs. And try it again, taking another little deeper breath than you're used to taking. Maybe even a longer breath. And hold it a little longer this time. And then please exhale again, letting all the air out of your lungs. And now I'd like you to find just a very natural rhythm to your breathing. You don't need to work at it, don't need to force it or control it. The power of the breathing is that we can involuntarily breathe or voluntarily breathe. We can consciously breathe or unconsciously breathe. The reason I know we've been unconsciously breathing, all of us are right now, is that if we weren't, we would probably be dead. So we're all unconsciously breathing until we make it conscious. Now, people get real scared about meditative practices, and I teach meditation through the sciences, through the neuroscience, through how the brain works, but people can sometimes get concerned or don't understand it. There are a lot of myths around it. Actually, the secret is all in breathing. That's the secret. And what I love about that is that, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but breathing is free. Like, it doesn't cost you anything, and it's always coming with you. So you actually have an opportunity to have a wonderful, wonderful coping skill that is sitting right inside of you at all times. Now, as you're focusing, as you probably still are, and I'm hoping you are, you might notice that thoughts come into your mind. And if a thought comes in, just allow yourself to notice it and observe it, and then go back to focusing on your breathing. And some of you might have 10 thoughts, 15 thoughts, 100 thoughts coming into your mind at once. Each one you just notice and you go back to your breathing. The power of these practices, guys, is that we have levels of our own self-talk. Everyone has this sort of voice inside of our head that we kind of have discussions with ourselves sometimes, or you have a voice that you can hear. Quite often, by the way, it's not as positive. It's a little more judgmental, sometimes just outright negative. And the practice of mindfulness is learning to observe rather than react to that voice. It's learning to quiet your body and mind. It's also probably the most powerful and helpful right now is the ability to learn to be present, to be in today. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I project too far in the future right now, it makes me anxious. I cannot predict what the future fully looks like. I'm trying to trust that the future will be something that I will be able to manage, and I want to be adaptive, and I want to be able to sort of flow with each day. But I really do feel better when I'm staying in the present moment. And each time you breathe in and you breathe out, you are helping yourself, and consciously breathing, you help yourself get back into the present. The research is stunning around mindfulness, and I won't talk too much about it, but we certainly know in the research, and science has been looking at mindfulness practices and meditation for years. And we know that it decreases stress. It decreases that level of vigilance you might be feeling, which is why many of us are unfortunately having trouble sleeping. There's a level of vigilance in our bodies that don't allow us to just sort of let down. It also reduces trauma experiences, if you guys have any history of trauma, and a lot of other both emotional and physical health issues are really very, very, very positively impacted by these practices. It also helps your body's ability to rest and heal and balance. So again, if you forgot or you kind of notice that you went off onto a detail or something, and you just notice, cease all judgment, don't be judgmental, don't be mean to yourself, practice kindness, and then just go back to your breathing. It also helps in our outlook, and it greatly impacts and increases productivity. So while you're continuing to breathe, I wanted to run a poll here for a moment. We're really interested in knowing what are you doing to help manage your COVID stress? And so here are some of the options. Some of the options are staying active, and you can see exercise, nature, drives, gardening. These are just some examples. Any maladaptive coping, a lot of us are. I certainly, on the first one, I had to write it first because I'm eating more than I usually do. Some people have increased their use of alcohol and drugs. Maladaptive, it's not healthy. Some of this, too much news, increased anger, increased more controlling behaviors. Another option is distraction, or are you using distraction, which can be very positive, but if you use too much, it can be more maladaptive. Social media, gaming, TV, art, reading, sports, whatever works for you to distract. Socializing and seeking support, either virtually or in person, but hopefully with distancing. And then mindfulness practices, if any of you guys have been practicing, and of course none of the above if I didn't have enough space to offer more options. I'm going to run a poll right now, so I'm going to start the poll, and you can answer any and all of these. So as I launch the poll, feel free, please, to answer them, any and all of them. My hope is that this question also will help you sort of give some thought to what are you doing, or some options about some things that you might want to add that could help with coping. One thing I'll say to you as you guys are answering is that one of the issues here is that we are going to need to take responsibility for our own willingness to help ourselves at different times during this process. Some of you might already notice you're feeling burned out, you're exhausted, you might be getting a little bit of a short fuse with family or friends. So all of that, we want to be able to add some coping mechanisms, some coping strategies to help. And anybody want to, I'm going to give you guys another 10 seconds before I end the poll, and I'll share results with you. Anybody want to see? I always like to give some time because someone always goes, wait a minute, but I'm not done yet. That's wonderful. 83% of you responded, so thank you so much for that. I'm going to share the results. You know, just what I thought, guys. Of course, in Mono County, why wouldn't we have the 70% of you responding that you're staying active? I live in Orange County, and I don't think we're getting that percentage probably of activity and nature and being able to get outside. Maladaptive coping is 50%, which is not unusual. I'm seeing that across the nation. Many of us are using maladaptive coping. And then as we get more self-awareness, hopefully trying to replace it with something that's more adaptive and better, healthier. Distraction, certainly 55% reported. Socializing and seeking support, thank you for that. And then 25% of you are doing mindfulness practices. Well, 5% of you, one person I didn't end up adding anything that they're doing. So perhaps you might want to throw that in the chat. We're very interested to know what other people are doing, because you can actually give others ideas that might really resonate with someone else that's participating tonight and attending. So I'm going to just provide you with some resources, and then I'm going to turn it over to our panel. Here are 3 apps that are incredible in my opinion. The Healthy Minds app comes from University of Wisconsin in Madison, and it is all about mindfulness and meditation, and it even has a whole section on COVID. It's easy, you can be led through meditations, or if you prefer, use YouTube. There's thousands and thousands of meditations there. COVID Coach is a newer app that is very, very good, and it helps you assess how you're doing. Really how you're doing, how your mood is, what are you needing? It's got some really good questionnaires. And then Ptsd Coach, if anyone is feeling traumatized or has a history of trauma, I invite you to download Ptsd Coach. Ptsd Coach was created by the military, and it is an excellent app, and it's used a lot by veterans. And really, again, if you're feeling and experiencing trauma, it's a great option and a great resource. And not to overwhelm you with resources, guys, but I did want to put some. Many people tell me that they're not sure who to listen to, in terms of information to understand levels of safety and levels of risk to take. So I've given you several to choose from. I also, as of a result of our conversations a couple weeks ago, I've put in some mental health options for you, some helplines if anyone feels they need. Please, 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 if you feel like you need to reach out, if in any way you feel in crisis, please do. This is less about, this can be less about mental health and much more about the fact that people are incredibly stressed during this time. But if you are also feeling like you have some sort of a mental health issue that you need to address, please, there are counselors available. There are many counselors available. And also I put in the suicide prevention hotline, just in case anyone is in any way feeling like they want to harm themselves. I want to invite all of you to go on Mindful Leader. Mindful Leader is a fantastic resource. It is free and you can go every hour on the hour during the week. Internationally, people all over the world are on Mindful Leader. There is someone that is sort of leading and it's 30 minutes only. You meditate or learn the practices for 15 minutes and then you have a wonderful conversation about how you're doing and what's going on. And then also there's this great anxiety workbook that I would greatly recommend. So I'm going to stop here, guys. And Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate that. So we do have the ability to, for discussion and questions, and we really encourage anybody who's listening to either put a question into the Q&A chat, which you'll see down at the bottom right of your screen. You can also raise your hand in the chat function, and I can answer your call, and you can speak directly to the panel and Beth. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and open it up to the rest of the panelists for some discussion, but we really do encourage anybody to kind of jump in with any questions, comments, coping mechanisms, or any sort of response to Beth's presentation as well. So thank you.
Hi, panelists.
Hello.
Did any of you resonate at all with any of the list of anxieties and feelings that Beth was talking about?
I was looking for a few more that weren't on there.
Yeah.
Seems like I do. Spinning around in circles, was that on there? Was that?
Yeah, I was thinking today, I feel more disjointed and a little checked out. Like, I think that's part of why I'm not tracking time as well.
I resonated with, I sleep well, but I'm still exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I think for us that are, spending a lot of screen time, that's very draining as well. And I find myself that after meetings, it's just, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Right.
Yeah, Stephanie, it's interesting. I saw a funny comic in the New York Times this week, and it was, am I working from home or am I living at work? Given this dynamic of how we're all at home working and it's sort of all blended together.
What was the answer?
Do you wish it had one?
Again, we want to invite people to raise their hand or put in the question or answer comments or any kind of questions that you have. This is a community forum, and Beth, want to thank you again for just giving us all that really wonderful and useful information. Also the breathing. You said you can have up to 100 thoughts at a time. I'm definitely close to that when I'm trying to practice.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I do have a question for you, Beth. More like asking like suggestions, right? Living here in Mono County, specifically here in Mammoth, where I think we're all seeing a lot more tourists coming in.
Yes.
And just I guess just some tips on how to deal with that social anxiety. And like, you were mentioning, like, I think our brains are so programmed to like stay away from people, right? And now we go to public places and there's a lot more people. And what are some tips that we can try so we climb that anxiety ladder and we don't go running back home?
Well, it's a really great question, Stephanie, and I'll tell you, what's sort of amazing to me is that it's so unusual for this many people, right now in the globe, to be dealing with such a similar issue, right? And I mean, we coined it interfacing anxiety because we didn't know what else to call it in my office. So one of my staff just said, well, let's call it interfacing anxiety. I was like, okay, because it's real. So one of one of the issues that I think are really important is for you to make real clarified decisions, that you are clear about not only where you're going when you're going to go out, but what it is you're going to bring with you. What are those, I get mad at myself because every time I go out of the car, I forget that I even need a mask. And I'm always running back to my car, continuously running back, because it's not a first language for me to be wearing masks, or we always have, hand sanitizer in, but making sure before you go out that you feel like you have done everything that you need to do to minimize your sense of risk. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, but we can't stop other people's choices right now, right? We can ask them, and I know we've had that conversation, Ingrid, right? We can ask people to distance and to wear their mask, but we also don't need to be in their presence if we're there. And I went into I treated my daughter last night, actually, and we went into a restaurant that's one of our favorites. We're going to take takeout. And the young man that was working there right at the kitchen did not have a mask. And I looked at my daughter, I'm like, we're not eating here. And it almost felt like a triumph for me. And I actually said to the woman who was taking the orders, we're not going to eat here because of your young man right back there. And he had, a little freaked out, but so I say that, please prepare yourselves and be aware, and maybe you'll go and you'll decide to leave, and that's okay too. Anybody else thoughts about what they're doing?
Yeah, it's hard to give yourself permission to walk away from a social situation because it feels awkward.
Yes.
And I'm used to confronting people and telling them what to do, but when I'm dressed like this, like a normal person, they don't know who I am. And they look at me funny, like, why is this lady telling me what to do? But to say to someone, hey, you forgot your mask. And when they want to confront or engage, to just say, I don't need to deal with you, and just to walk away. Even if it costs you a favorite dinner or something that you really wanted to do, but you have to put your choices first, just like they put their own choices first.
Yeah, and I agree. It's really hard, Ingrid, because, most of us we want people to like us, right? We want to feel like we're included. And this is a time where in order to take care of ourselves and stay safe, we are going to have to deal with some of that discomfort.
How about navigating family and friend relationships around spending time together? Has anybody got some good magic words around that, or struggling with that, or want to talk a little bit about their process?
I can chime in on ours. We have, as I'm sure all of you do, relatives and family members and acquaintances and friends that are all over the spectrum of how they're re-entering and what they're doing. And so we have just been very upfront communicating what our family practices are and how what we're doing at this point, and that when we shift and transition out of that, we would kind of let people know. So just kind of being very forward with it has been helpful for us.
And have you had people give you a hard time?
People that have disagreed, but not necessarily given us a hard time. I don't know what they're saying, behind my back. But.
Uh-huh. I think it's, we want to gravitate towards people that we love. And at least I noticed, I've had very little social contact because I'm very fortunate to have a job where I can work at home. And I just noticed that, the goodbye, the hello and the goodbye is awkward because you want to hug the person or move closer to them, it begs to me the idea that maybe I'm taking this a little too seriously. And I've had family members say, but we're family. And, again, I think that just adds a lot of stress. And if you're already, we all want to belong, right? We all want to make sure our connections are whole and they're important to us. And at the same time, the consequences of, at least for me, if I were to pass this along to somebody, that would be very hard for me to live with.
I'm going to be on a plane soon with my 84-year-old father. And so I have a little bit of anxiety over that, more about managing him. I'm bringing him an N95 mask and a regular mask. And you know, fortunately, we're just going from Burbank to Oakland, so small airports within California where people are supposed to wear masks. It should be fine, but it's going to be interesting. It's kind of, I have a lot of prep that I wouldn't normally have to do to go on a little trip with my dad, and then we'll be isolated when we get up there at my sister's house. But I just dawned on me that I'm actually glad for the first time ever that I'm not from a family of huggers, because I always kind of regretted that we're not huggers, but now I'm like, it's kind of nice. I don't have to hug my dad, and he's really uncomfortable with it anyway. So now it's fine.
Again, I want to remind people that we have a question and answer box. You can raise your hand or type in a comment or a question. Anything like, how are you doing? What are some of the strategies you have? Any questions you might have? Maybe you want us to do a role play. Whatever it is, let us know.
Well, so on that note, Robin, one thing, I just got an email, you know, and I know we've all heard there's a lot, and Stephanie mentioned this, there's a lot of anxiety about tourists, about our visitors coming back, about reopening our tourism and recreation-based economy. And in particular, you know, there's anxiety about the fact that the places where our property owners come from have high infection rates, and the rates are going up, you know, throughout California. But there's also a lot of anxiety. There's a perception that our guests maybe aren't as interested as we are living here in wearing face coverings and following the rules, that, you know, maybe all bets are off when you get into Mammoth and Mono County because, you know, there's open space. And we are fortunate. I spent the entire day today hiking in Tuolumne Meadows. I didn't have to wear a face covering. No one was there because reservations are required. And, you know, so the few people we passed, we had adequate, plentiful social distance, and it was fantastic. But at the same time, you got to leave your campsite and go to Vaughn's or go to a restaurant. And there's so much anxiety for our workers here, just for people in general. So maybe, you know, how could we, Robin suggested role play, and maybe we could hear from Beth. How do we deal? What are some ways we can deal with this? What do you call it, Beth? Interactional anxiety?
Yeah, interfacing anxiety.
Interfacing anxiety. And I think some of it comes down to setting some boundaries and just practicing. What are you going to do? So maybe we could practice.
Yeah, I think scripting it is really...
Robin and someone else.
I think scripting it is really helpful, Stacy, because if we end up in the middle of a situation and we, you know, I think it's better to have a good couple sentences to be able to say than to sort of try to think about it on the fly, if you know what I mean. So I think there's some real value in actually scripting it. And Robin, you're so good at that, so I'm gonna hand that over to you. But
this, you know, is so unfair.
But I do say that
I want to start by saying something that I'm looking at all of you, and I know that we've got quite a number of people listening in, and I do hope you'll ask questions or make comments, but I feel really proud of us right now. You know, this is unbelievably stressful and hard to do. And every day we wake up and okay, we're going to go at it again. And now here we are all together, moving this forward, trying to give ourselves and each other and our community some scripting skills that I'm really good at, apparently. Okay. Put your damn mask on or I'm going to beat you up. Does that count? No, probably not.
No, but
that's where my anger is coming out. So I think what I'm responding to in this today is a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what we talked about 2 weeks ago, and I know I'm certainly struggling with myself, is how globalized this is, how every conversation I have leads to COVID pretty much, how it's a part of my work, it's a part of my day, it's a part of what I'm reading about, blah, blah, blah. But today we're talking about what we all individually have some kind of control over, our breath being part of it, as you said, right? And so I think, you know, like what I've been realizing is if I put everything in I have a bag that I put my mask and all my accoutrements, my COVID accoutrements into, so that I just pick that up and take it with me. And there's something about that action that reminds me that I'm taking care of myself and I'm taking care of my community. And I feel very strongly, I'm one of the people who feels very strongly that my participation with wearing a mask and keeping distance is protecting you as much as it protects me. It's like it's a statement every day for me of, I care about my community. I want my businesses to stay open. So that's part of it. And then I actually give myself permission to avoid confrontation. I don't know, we can talk about scripting. I might not be your best person today, but I'll walk into a situation and I'll see that people are not participating in this experience in the way that I'm comfortable with, and I just go away. I move away. And again, I'm not a worker who's stuck behind a counter with all kinds of people all day telling me their opinions about masks, which I know is very stressful for people. But like if I go to the post office or a store or whatever and people aren't participating, I just avoid it. Today I got gas and I wore a mask and there was no one within, I don't know, miles of me probably. And I just thought, oh, this is interesting. Like it's my practice now to wear a mask. Okay, that's good. And then I'm worried about people making fun of me or maybe confronting me because I'm wearing it. And so then that's where I have all kinds of things I can't probably say in public all ready to go. But I don't know. What about the rest of you? I'm kind of punting with a question here.
I would just like to say thank you to Joyce for putting in a Q&A so that it might save us from role playing.
I know. See that.
So Joyce's question, and I think Joyce, if this is the correct Joyce, happens to be my aunt. She's amazing. She says, I also have anxiety with friends not understanding why I won't venture out. And for some background, Joyce is a widow, so she's living alone. Though she's extremely social, but I have anxiety with friends not understanding why I won't venture out.
Yeah, you know, this is a time, in my opinion, where being judgmental of each other is really not very helpful versus having a sense of real compassion and understanding that we're all in different situations and we're all trying our best to create the risk tolerance or take the risks that we're willing to take. And I think that's part of, and I know, you know, Ingrid has talked about this, right? That's part of the anger, right? That we end up seeing, right? Is that people feel like they've gotten into this place where they feel like either they're right or they're wrong about what's, you know, I'm right and you're wrong about what we're doing, versus this is a choice you're making. And if that choice, like Robin was saying, is really going to potentially harm someone, then we have a choice there. Do we say something or don't we? Do we leave? And I don't think there needs to be a judgment around that either.
I had an experience that was causing me a lot of anxiety, like staying awake at night, worrying about things. We have one of our daughters and her large group of children and her partner are coming in a motorhome and gonna, you know, camp probably over at Shady Rest or something. And then there'll be lots of occasions to try to get together. There's other family that live here. And I was feeling really anxious about that because it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to want to come in our house. They're going to want to use the bathroom. They're going to want to eat in the house. What are we going to do? We can go outside. And so we were talking and she made this comment of well, aren't you going to want to hold the baby? And I'm like, you know, maybe we should stop a second and talk about, like, they're out and about. They're, you know, they're young family. They're mixing out much more than my husband and I are. So I said, how about if we just agree that we will each of us take whatever the other family wants to do and just totally respect that, and in turn have it come back the other way. So if you're comfortable going out and seeing friends and mixing around and doing that, I'm going to say, great, that's great, you know, and then we're more staying in and just socializing with a small group and getting exercise and doing things like that. And when you come to visit, what's going to happen is the people with the most restrictive view will be that is sort of dictates what everybody else is going to do. And in turn, you'll say whatever you're comfortable with, I support that, and we'll say the same to you, and kind of come to a decision, a little discussion about that, so that rather than internalizing all that anxiety that was keeping me awake at night, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? How are we going to handle this? Then we have a little game plan going into it. So that's what I sort of tried to do. And, you know, so far, so good.
It was well received, Linda, that conversation?
Well, it was, yeah, because I think she was feeling anxiety too, that we were going to judge them for not being as restrictive and for
Right.
being out and about more and not wearing masks all the time. They, you know, and I was afraid that they were going to do the same to us. So by maybe just talking about it, we leveled it a little bit. So
Yeah, it was disarming. That's great.
I guess I do have a script, and I think it goes like this. Like, I'm so glad to be able to see you, and I'm being really careful. And so you can, here's what I'm comfortable with. You know, you can come into on my back deck. I don't want to touch. I guess basically that we just, I set out really clearly what I'm comfortable with. And definitely I would say most of the people in my life, not all, are not living as restrictive or as carefully as I am.
mhm.
And I think there are certain family members that are really outside of that, and they have been really surprised by my response because it makes our relationship have this intentional conversation that we're not normally having. Like, when you come to my house, you can only use this cup and it can only go like, you don't have those kinds of conversations, right? You just come to my house and we have dinner. But now it's like everything is prescriptive and everything is intentional. And I think that's very, very different. And it seems to be working for me too.
Robin, do you also think it's part of the reason why we are so globally exhausted? You know,
Totally.
we are so, everyone needs to be in this state of level of awareness and vigilance. And, you know, our brains are wired to be pretty on prefer to be on autopilot and pretty lazy. And we have to stay intentional. It's very exhausting. It takes a lot of energy.
And go ahead.
Well, we've just got another question, which is a good segue. I think, you know, we're talking a lot about current sort of situation and feelings. This next question is regarding the impending economic recession. And this question says, I am concerned and filled with angst about the impending economic recession, as well as the fact that this crisis has reinforced disparities between communities with the most and least resources and the failings of the American healthcare system. In Mammoth, we have families living in overcrowded apartments, struggling to pay rent, and then we have folks who own more than a $1 million home. So that's sort of the next wave, I guess, right, Beth?
That's the wave. This is a wave.
And I think one thing that this attendee brings up is that this health crisis has brought into stark relief the other crises that exist in our society, just that income inequality, disparity. I mean, think about the justice and discussions we're having right now about racism. You know, this is all struck us collectively as a society so deeply right now, I think, because of the COVID crisis. But I think there's an opportunity, I hope there's an opportunity for us to address some of these issues. And it starts by talking about them, having these conversations. You know, whether you're having that conversation as we did, as many people here in Mammoth did at a protest where in a demonstration where they were good about maintaining social distance and wearing masks, but starting to have these conversations, talking about this and seeing what we can do. You know, one thing from a local government perspective, we tried to do to address the immediate rent issues was to provide some short-term rental relief. But now we need to start talking about, you know, what does that look like in the longer term? But I hope talking about it is a place to start. We need to act. We can't just talk, but naming it and not pretending that it isn't there. Because right now we probably all have too much time, you know, or to think about these things. And if we're not talking about them too and working on this together, we're all going to suffer.
To dovetail on that, Stacey, I would like to say that this is a time when I think it's really important for us, those of us in leadership positions, to be talking about the structural problems so that we don't reduce this down to individual problems. That somehow the people who have the $1 million home are more worthy than the people who are going to be struggling and living in an apartment together. And that as a community, we start to pull together around that these are structural issues, and we help people have the language to talk about it so that we're not reducing it down to, you know, that somehow I'm better or I'm worse because of my situation in the world. I feel like that's super important for us.
I also think that this is a great opportunity for us, you know, the ones that we're very fortunate to still have jobs, right? To help those that have been more financially impacted by this, whether it's buying your neighbor, you know, a pack of diapers for their baby, or, you know, just offering friends and family, hey, you know, if you need assistance with, you know, your electric bill or whatever it is, for us that have been more fortunate to keep our jobs, to extend that olive branch to people that may be in need, whether it's, you know, filling up their gas tank, or any little bit helps, really in when you're in such a tight crunch budget.
Just to chime in on that, you know, COVID has brought up a lot of these, I guess, like we can see gaps that have been happening in our community. We also see, you know, there's racism happening, other things like that. But also what I've seen in our community is that we have come together to help those in need. We have provided people, you know, along with the housing, but also with the food bank. And I think it's brought a lot of people together, but in a different way. So it's also been in a positive being for our community as well.
I think marking our strengths, like you're saying, Cassandra, and making sure that we're continuing to fortify the strengths that we have. I think it's really easy to get stuck in the anxiety about what's happening. You know, it's not just in the world, it's also personal. But really, like you're saying, like keeping this moving forward, keeping these conversations happening, I think it's so valuable. And
Robin,
sorry, go ahead. No, you go.
I was just going to say that thinking, you know, in this discussion of some skills or techniques people can use to help themselves, one thing I really appreciate about all of, there are three of you here on this panel, our team in Mono County Behavioral Health, is one of the values or principles you operate under is this strengths-based approach. And could you talk a little bit more about that? You know, what would that look like if, like, for instance, I mean, Cassandra and I just kind of demonstrated it. Maybe I said something really, you know, negative, like, wow, yeah, there's all this really bad stuff going on and so much injustice and disparity. And she, and, you know, but she said, yeah, but we've been able to address that. We have some programs in place. We're looking at this, but how would you know, say an issue like that, or maybe another issue, even if it's just, wow, I'm so frustrated with myself. I can't focus right now. I'm not getting my work done. I'm a bad person and I'm never going to be able to do anything when this is over. You know, how could a strengths-based approach help us here? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Again. So a strength-based approach, the foundation of that is that we're all doing our best, and that every behavior that we have has a reason. We're after something. So let's say I'm participating in, let's just as a theory say, I have participated in some maladaptive behaviors. I'm going to name a cocktail the Maladaptive Cocktail, by the way. So that's not because I'm a bad person. That's not because I'm not trying. That's not because that's because I'm trying very hard to manage a certain feeling that I don't have another way to manage. So to make something adaptive, to be strength-based would be, okay, let's say my maladaptation is I'm going to eat more, or I'm not going to get exercise as much because I'm so tired. Then I can start to just do little bits of things every day. It's kind of like addressing the systemic racism or the systemic economic disparity. If you continually look that in the eye all the time, it's going to feel so big. It's kind of like, how do you eat an elephant? You know, it's one bite at a time, that weird analogy. But I think that reminding ourselves that we are doing this. You know, we might not be doing it in a way that is working in the best way. We might not be doing it in the way that we all would agree would be the best way. We might not be doing it in the way that's going to actually give us the biggest positive experience, but we are still doing it. We're doing this experience right now. We're talking about this stuff. Our vulnerability is very important in this process, I think. And so the strength-based is finding the ways in which things are working, even if they're not working in the way that is the easiest or the best. Because then you take that and you can grow that. If all we do is look, not that you're saying this, but if we look only at the problems, like if all I do is think about my worry and my concern about COVID, I will become paralyzed very quickly. And part of why I'm tired is the energy it takes to be continuing to make a life within this time that we're all trying to do. That takes a ton of energy. But I will say, talking to all of you, it helps me tremendously to just know that other people are doing this too. That is a strength. We have tremendous strength right now. You know, if we weren't doing anything through the county, let's say, or the town to help businesses open, this would be a disaster. So it may not be that it's working as well as we want it to, but it is working. And that is because people are putting a ton of energy and effort into it. But some American culture looks at what isn't, and then we define ourselves by that. And so I don't know how you got to the waterfall today, but I'm going to guess it was one step at a time, right? And that it was worth it, and that you didn't just arrive at the waterfall. So it's like, how do we in each breath and each mindful moment, how do we account for what we're doing during the day? And what we're doing that's actually helpful. Those are strengths. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I see that we have a question too.
We do. We actually have a really good question about someone who's looking to provide resources. And she says she's a longtime local widow living in one of those $1 million homes, works at the cast off, does tons of volunteer stuff, but I'm considered old. Not finding out how I can help. Other than the food bank, what can I do to help the community that is suffering? I'm so afraid that our town is going to die if we get a corona resurgence.
Oh, great question.
Great question.
Yeah.
I also don't feel like we really answered Joyce's question exactly either, in terms of, aside from Joyce, your nephew's wonderful to work with. You know, that, like, what do you do if you're alone and isolated? I think that's kind of what we're talking about. And how do you manage and create purpose in your life? Is that kind of the question? I've been talking a lot. Who would like to answer that question?
So Robin, my dad lives by himself. He's 84, and his church is his family because his kids don't live there. And it was really hard for him to not be engaged. And then church went to kind of a Zoom platform and webinars and things like that. And he, God love him, figured out how to do Zoom and was doing his groups and things like that. And that's one way to connect. It's actually feeling more personal than meeting in person, than physically meeting with people, because you can look at everybody while you're talking. I don't know. That's one way to connect. And then how to make a difference. That's a really good question in this community. Financially, obviously, that's a great help, but it's more rewarding to like engage with someone and do something. And I don't know if anybody has some great ideas on that. Alicia, is there anything in the business community that could do that? Put you on the spot.
Well, I don't know about the business community per se, but I do think that, you know, of course, you know, church services are back in place, or, you know, places of worship are back open. And I know my mom is also suffering. She has COPD, and she's very, very active and very quite well, but she's really found this to be an incredibly lonely time. And what she's been starting to do is her friends have come over and they actually have a visit on the deck, so that on the patio, so that they're far apart from each other, but they at least have, you know, some social interaction. I don't know if that's a solution for everybody, but that might help.
Do you think if we had drop-in community Zoom meetings for people to just drop in, we could, I don't know, have tea together, or just connect and maybe come up with some ideas of how to create purpose? Do you think people would attend? I mean, I'm asking the public too, like, would people go to that? Like, you know, kind of like meeting up at the park, or get some of the social interaction you would get at work? Or, I mean, I do think one of the things we're hearing is, how do we keep this conversation going aside from this platform? How do you think people would jump in on a Tuesday at 6:30 and just show up and hang out?
Well, I can jump in and let you know, one of the resources that Social Services has partnered with the state on through the California Department of Aging is called Engage California. And that campaign and program, I think, would work really well. It basically is checking in with 3 neighbors each day, you know, making a phone call, sending an email. I think picking up the phone and, you know, reaching out to the others in the similar situation, you know, people that just checking in and seeing how people are doing. So it's called Engage California, engageca.org, or you can find information on the Mono County coronavirus page. But that's one option as well. There's definitely a lot of other resources on that website as well.
I wonder if
Can I add? Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Oh,
Stacey.
I was wondering if there was a way to, because I think one of the problems is a lot of people don't know how to set up a Zoom meeting. Like, I created my own Zoom account, and it wasn't that hard, and set up a meeting with my sisters and my dad, but he doesn't know how to do that. Is there like a YouTube video that can show people, or something where we can engage with people and teach them how to do that?
We could totally do that. Stephanie could totally do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Can I add another piece too? Robin, I think your idea is great if you sort of created a time where people could come on. But I'm wondering also if it would have utility to create a time where we could actually, you know, that question was such an important question about, you know, we have a woman who is saying she has resources. She wants to be able to provide and touch lives. You know, why wouldn't we create committees where people who are interested in, whether you have resources or don't even have as much resources, to be able to come on in and figure out how you want to be creative in the community? What do you want to do? And people could end up meeting each other. You know, you guys know I've done a lot of mass trauma work, and I have to tell you, one thing we noticed in the counties that had the horrific fires was this: those people that were actively trying to make it better did better psychologically. They did better. And part of what we did in a number of counties was to even seek people out to be able to become part of these kind of groups that we knew were isolated. So just thoughts.
I wonder if there's a way we could use a platform like that to connect people together. Maybe even, you know, going back to the state program that Justin referenced, you know, could we do something like that locally? You know, how do we and this goes back to some of the work that behavioral health did in winter around suicide prevention and awareness. How do we reach in? And, you know, and that was going to be my suggestion to Vicki. And I'm so glad that you commented on this, Vicki, and that you want to help, you know, through your contacts at Cast Off or anywhere around town, you know, just randomly texting someone who's your friend. Or I've seen people reaching out on Facebook, or people have Facebook messaged me, hey, how are you doing? So that makes me think, okay, I should send a message to someone else now. I don't know could we formalize that in any way?
Yeah.
You know, is there a way to get to people who are feeling lonely, hearing from someone, maybe having a, sorry, my throat, like everyone else's, is covered in pine pollen. You know, having some kind of conversation. And I know behavioral health has been so great in putting things like that together before. So maybe there's something we could do around that. It's resources. And we have another question, you know, getting back to the anxiety I was talking about. We have guests coming who aren't following the safety rules in place, and it's causing a lot of anxiety. Is there, you know, can we get more masks out there? Could, you know, the condo office rental have masks there? And, you know, are there more resources we could be getting out to people and helping people figure out how to navigate these uncertain times? But maybe, you know, one thing I've seen is businesses that have masks in hand I think Stephanie was talking about like a local business that had, you know, a basket of masks out in front of the door. You know, if it becomes kind of a habit for, hey, take a mask before you walk in, or, oh, I see you don't have a mask, here you go, you know, something like that. So resources that are real concrete, but also kind of more abstract or programmatic might help.
So we're getting questions now. Do you want to continue for a little bit longer and answer them?
Sure. We've got.
I haven't read them.
We Supervisor Corliss kind of addressed the question regarding the face masks, and then Vicki kind of went in. You know, she's really looking for, I think, a way to give back and serve. And in addition to, I think, sort of what we've already talked about, it might be worth, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of volunteer opportunities that necessarily aren't coordinated from one space, and maybe there's something we could do around volunteer opportunities.
Well, I know
it sounds like people want a way to engage in some purpose, right? And if we can't go out and do it, how do we can we create some kind of venue for that conversation? Is that captured a little bit? Cassandra and Stephanie, we want to talk about that, do you think, through our department and see if we can come up with some ideas?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, now that we're looking at, you know, trying to see what we can do through our wellness program, I definitely can see, you know, us integrating this and hoping to do things outdoors and have times, you know, when it's not too hot or and it's a perfect, you know, day for the community too. And, you know, take the procedures that we should, you know, practicing social distancing and wearing our mask and stuff like that. So I don't see it as an inconvenience, and I think this would be really well. And also too, maybe we could do, you know, more of these Zoom meetings, maybe do like a coffee talk or do a happy hour, and everyone can maybe do like make their favorite cocktail, and, you know, and I don't know. Yeah, it would be great.
I wonder too if Vicki, maybe we could put you in touch with social services and Kathy Peterson. I know there's a lot of older folks in the Antelope Valley area that are really missing their connection through the community or the senior center. They used to meet every single day for lunch, and, you know, they had recreation and games and so on. And I bet they're just plain lonely. Maybe
Totally.
a matter of a phone call from you to say, hi, I'm working, you know, I'm volunteering with social services, just checking in to see how you're doing. What I've been astonished with in terms of reaching out to the business community is how many business owners just want to talk. They just want to talk to somebody who is maybe not family, because that can be tiresome. But so I don't know. I think there's an opportunity there. Maybe Vicki will have you touch base with Kathy if you're interested.
Vicki, I provided my email if you'd like to email me, or you can reply with your email address if you're comfortable, and I'll connect you.
And Justin, there might be some resources about specific ways to give back. For instance, the rental assistance program might be taking donations. You know, you might be able to connect Vicki to some really specific, you know, through your involvement in the Emergency Operations Center.
Absolutely.
Now that AMACA is going to be taking over sort of the food, you know, distribution programs, there might be opportunities there too. So I think AMACA, you know, can, you know, use in a number of ways can use volunteer services. I'm sure they're not face-to-face, but yeah, I'm you know, somebody else mentioned on the questions was, I'm a huge fan of social meetups that are socially distanced with masks. And the reason is that we're having this window of good weather, which, you know, the curtain comes down on that, you know, this fall. I mean, it will not be, you know, we will not be able to eat at restaurants outside without, you know, snowsuits on. We will not be able to do other things. That this is the time to do that. Even going for a walk, I think we've, you know, understand that that can be safe now with someone who, you know, both of you masked, you know, 6 feet apart, trying to distance and walking. I mean, I think that those are opportunities for that connection that is really so important right now. And it has been my favorite for me personally, so I would endorse that.
Also, Vicky, if you're free this, it actually starts tomorrow, I believe. The town is having they're calling it Defensible space cleanup. So the gist of it is you go and you pick up a trash bag and you fill it up with just, you know, trash that you may pick around. And I think for every bag that you pick up, they're giving you like a raffle ticket. So I can definitely put the link of from the town and the information as well if that's something that you know, the community is interested.
And I just add to the other question about the concern about visitors not following safety guidelines. You know, tomorrow night, I think it's the last community conversation with our Emergency Operations Center Unified Command leaders, and that might be a good place. You know, Justin, maybe since you're involved in that, just making sure that that issue gets addressed, because that's definitely something we're hearing a lot. And what do? We can't control the fact that people are coming up, and you know, if you're you live in a condo complex and a big group is staying in a condo next to you and not masking, you know, what is the emergency? What is the unified command? What is our response team doing to try to address those issues? Because I know there's work being done around that.
Yes, yeah, we'll make sure that's part of the discussion tomorrow for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You're important to me. You're part of my community. Thank you, community, for tuning in. We will do this again.
And Vicky, you're not old.
Yeah.
You're not old.
For those of us who know Vicky, she's not old. And she's
Will you say that to me, please?
You're not old, Robin.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
See you soon.
Stay well.